SLT අලුත් මෙගා ලයින් කනෙක්ෂන් වලට 50%ක දීවන. තවත් ඔෆර් ගැන දැනගන්න 1212 අමතන්න.
Tonight, burned to ashes, historical cathedral in France, Notre Dame, engulfed in flames. French president vows to rebuild with millions of donations already pledged. America's stance. New US ambassador to Sri Lanka says America will be a supporter in maintaining Sri Lanka's UNHRC commitments.
For many reasons, the promises the government has made to its people here are important.
Is it right when the United States has withdrawn from the UNHRC itself to want countries to comply?
Significant reduction. Police media spokesperson SP Ruwangunasekara says there is a decline in the number of accidents during this season. Police continue to monitor vehicular movement. Fit enough. Chief Select of Sri Lanka Cricket announces that Kusal Janit can represent Sri Lanka at 2019 World Cup. All this and much more coming up on First at 9 this Tuesday, the 16th of April 2019.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Images of flames engulfing the historic Cathedral Notre Dame, a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1991 and one of Paris's most popular tourist sites, was splashed around the globe. Its iconic facade and towers were salvaged, as were a host of invaluable artifacts and works of art stored inside, including the Holy Crown, believed by many to be from the crown of thorns placed on the head of Jesus, and which the cathedral calls its most precious and most venerated relic. French prosecutors say that the fire was probably caused by accident and has opened investigation into involuntary destruction by fire. But as the world watched in shock when the 850-year-old Notre Dame Cathedral burned down, French President Emmanuel Macron sent a message of hope of rebuilding the iconic monument, as nearly €500,000 already been pledged to rebuild the monument. A massive fire consumed Notre Dame Cathedral yesterday, gutting the roof of the Paris landmark and stunning France and the world. But firefighters managed to save the shell of the stone structure and its two main bell towers from collapse. The fire raged for several hours before 400 firefighters, working with skill and precision to avoid further damage to the medieval landmark, managed to bring it under control. They were unable to save the spire, however, which burned to a blackened shell before finally toppling, as thousands of Parisians who had gathered in the streets watched in horror.
It's really sad. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, it's a part of history and you never really want to lose that. And so I think also for a lot of people, it's a really deep religious symbol as well. And so I think that having that connection and seeing it go up in flames is very touching.
Notre Dame's foundation stone was laid in 1163 by Pope Alexander III, and the cathedral was completed in the 13th century with its towers, spire, flying buttresses and stained glass. It is both an architectural jewel and a major religious and cultural symbol of France. Located in Île-de-la-Cité, a small island in the middle of the city, the cathedral is one of Paris' most popular attractions, drawing an estimated 13 million visitors a year. For centuries, the building has been considered the heart of Catholic life in France, a site of pilgrimage for people around the world and home to many priceless religious relics. In a speech at the scene of the incident, French President Macron said Notre Dame was France's history, literature and destiny, and that the historic landmark would be rebuilt together and with the greatest talents from across border.
Le pire a été évité, même si My thoughts go out to the Catholics in France and all over the world, especially during this Holy Week. I know how they feel and we are with them. Notre Dame of Paris is our history, our literature, our imagination, the place where we have lived all our great moments, our epidemics, our wars, our liberation. It is the epicenter of our lives. So I say this very solemnly to you tonight. We will rebuild this cathedral together, and it is undoubtedly part of the French destiny and a project for the years to come.
Many world leaders have offered their condolences, with leader of the Catholic Church, His Holiness Pope Francis, taking to Twitter saying, quote, "Today we unite in prayer with the people of France as we wait for the sorrow inflicted by the serious damage to be transformed into hope with reconstruction," unquote. French President Emmanuel Macron vowed to reconstruct the historic building even as the fire still burned, while two French business magnates had pledged about 300 million euros between them today. Offers of help with the reconstruction have also poured in from around the globe, with European Council President Donald Tusk calling on EU member states to rally round. Meanwhile, Sri Lankan President Maithripala Sirisena, taking to Twitter, said, "As the blaze devastates the invaluable Notre Dame Cathedral that inspired devotees and artists over the centuries, Sri Lanka stands in solidarity with the people of France and the noble mission to rebuild this world's heritage." Paris public prosecutor Remy Heitz said his office was favouring the theory of an accident, but had assigned 50 people to work on what he believed would be a long and complex investigation. Other officials have suggested it could be linked to extensive renovation works taking place at the cathedral. Meanwhile, speaking to First at 9 on the tragic incident, Director of the Archdiocese of Social Communication and Cultural Centre, Father Edmonton Tilakaratna, expressed his solidarity with all Christians across the globe at the fate of the iconic Notre Dame.
We as Sri Lankans, and especially Catholics of this country, extend our sorrow for the Archbishop of Paris and the people of France for the fire that devastated Notre Dame Cathedral. It is reported that Vatican has offered technical assistance for the reconstruction of the Catholic historic sanctuary.
Police media spokesperson SP Ruwan Gunasekara says that 19 accidents which occurred during the past 3 days claimed the lives of 20 people. However, police media spokesperson added that there is a decline in the number of accidents compared to the same period last year. 2 train accidents were also reported today. Police media spokesperson Ruwan Gunasekara says that lives of 20 people were claimed due to 19 accidents which took place during the past 3 days. He, however, said that there is a decline in the number of accidents compared to the same period last year. Meanwhile, 2 train accidents were reported today. Trains on the Kalni Valley railway line were delayed this morning due to the derailment of a Colombo-bound train. The train, which departed from Avisavella, derailed between Kirulapana and Narahinpita railway stations near Kalingamawatha. Although no passengers were reported to be injured, the railway line as well as several houses in the area were damaged. Meanwhile, a compartment of the Galukumari train which left Beliatta to Colombo derailed near the Gove railway station this morning. The train, which departed the station at 7:25 in the morning, derailed after travelling 500 metres. However, the railway line was restored by this afternoon. In the meantime, an individual was killed in a collision which occurred in Kegol along the Avisavella road today. The individual is reported to be a 56-year-old resident from Devalakanda. Meanwhile, the life of a woman was claimed in a motorcycle collision in Kumburugoda in Bandaragama today. According to our correspondent, the injured woman succumbed to injuries upon admission to hospital. A couple was killed in a motor accident when the 3-wheeler they travelled in collided on a utility pole in Nandagama Kolonna in Ratnapura last evening. The driver of the 3-wheeler had fled the scene following the incident. The Kolonna police is conducting investigations to apprehend the driver. Meanwhile, speaking to media today, police media spokesperson SP Ruwan Gunasekara revealed that the number of accidents during the season has declined compared to last year.
රිය අනතුරු සම්බන්ධයෙන් සාකච්ඡා කරද්දී අප්‍රේල් 13 14 15 කියන තෙදින තුලදී මාරක රියානතුරු සිද්ධීන් 19ක් වාර්තා වෙනවා. මේ මාරක රියානතුරු සිද්ධීන් 19 දී පුද්ගලයන් 20ක් ජීවිතක්ෂයට පත් වෙලා තියෙනවා. නමුත් 2018 වර්ෂයත් සමග සසඳන විට 2018 වර්ෂයේ අප්‍රේල් 13, 14 සහ 15 දින තුනත් සමග සසඳන විට ඉතා පැහැදිලි අඩුවක් මේ වර්ෂයේදී පෙන්눔 කරනවා මාරක රියානතුරු වල. 2018 වර්ෂයේ ඒ සඳහන් කරපු දින 3 තුලදී මාරක රියානතුරු සිද්ධීන් 50කදී පුද්ගලයන් 51ක් ජීවිතක්ෂයට පත් වෙලා තිබෙනවා. මෙලෙස අඩකටත් වැඩියෙන් මේ වර්ෂයේදී අඩු කර ගැනීමට හැකියාව ලැබුණා. හේතු කිහිපයක් බලපාලා තිබෙනවා. ඉදිරි දින කිහිපය තුලදී රථවාහන පාලනය කිරීම සඳහාත් මාර්ග ආරක්ෂාව තහවුරු කිරීම සඳහාත් අනතුරු අවම කිරීම සඳහාත් ඒ වගේම රථවාහන තදබදය අවම කිරීම සඳහාත් රථවාහන අංශ නිලධාරීන්ව රාජකාරී යොදවලා තිබෙන්නේ. රියදුරන්ගෙනුත් ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා ඒ වගේම සහයෝගයක් ලබා දෙන්න කියලා.
US Ambassador to Sri Lanka Elena B. Teplitz highlighted the stance of the United States regarding the Sri Lanka co-sponsored UNHRC resolution 40/L1 during a current affairs program at Hyde Park. Speaking to Indira Amawatta in her first televised interview in Sri Lanka, the US Ambassador emphasized on the responsibility that lies with the Sri Lankan government to uphold commitments towards citizens of the island nation following co-sponsoring of the recent resolution. Teplitz also assured that the United States will be a supporter in maintaining these commitments by the government.
40L1 was passed in Geneva recently at the UNHRC sessions. How will the US pursue the implementation or the full implementation of this resolution, especially when the United States withdrew from the UNHRC?
Yes, in fact, we did withdraw from the Council, but that does not diminish our respect for human rights and the need to support human rights in not only our own country but in others. And with regard to the resolution, the government here co-sponsored that resolution. Right. I think its commitment, the government's commitment to its own people is what is very important in this. And that the goals that are specified in that resolution, the promises there are very important for Sri Lanka going forward, not only to ensure a peaceful future. We see so many countries that dissolve into conflict. That does not have to happen here, and there's progress being made towards addressing those things. I also think addressing what is contained in that resolution is important for the economic future of this country. Businesses want to see that as well. So I think for many reasons, the promises the government has made to its people here are important to uphold, and the United States certainly plans to be a supporter of those promises.
The United States withdrawing from the UNHRC, calling it a cesspool of bias. Now, the United States holding countries accountable for their actions. But again, is it right when the United States has withdrawn from the UNHRC itself to want countries to comply?
International values around human rights are universal. Both our countries are signatories to the Declaration on Universal Declaration on Human Rights. Those things are already on the table, and we don't need the UNHRC to help us navigate those. So I think understand what they mean and how to apply them. So in that sense, knowing that there's high-level commitment to achieving those goals, to looking at reconciliation, the truth-seeking, to finding answers for the families of the missing. Again, these things are signals not only of intentions to people here, but also to the international community about what kind of government and people Sri Lanka really are.
You can catch the full discussion in Indira Amawatta had with the new US Ambassador to Sri Lanka, Elena B. Teplitz, at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24 tomorrow at 7 p.m. On to some other local news now. Counter-terrorism police of the United Kingdom had arrested 4 Sri Lankans at Luton Airport in London last week on suspicion of holding the membership of a proscribed organisation which is contrary to the British Terrorism Act. The group had been arrested on the 10th of April upon their arrival to the United Kingdom and remained in police custody in Bedfordshire for further investigation. The UK media later reported that the arrested were released on the 12th. It is reported that the suspects had sought asylum status upon their arrival in the UK and had told the airport authorities that they face persecution in their native Sri Lanka in connection with the LTTE organisation. Now, it has been a little over 2 years since the Meethotamulla garbage dump collapsed, claiming the lives of 32. Although this incident raised many questions surrounding waste management, has it been taken seriously enough? AdaDerana received a similar report to that of the Meethotamulla at the AdaDerana waste management project site. With around 500 metric tons of waste piled at the site, area residents allege that the authorities have requested them to evacuate their homes owing to the risk of the garbage dump collapsing. Only 12 out of the 25 acres at the AdaDerana waste site is utilised to dump garbage. Waste from Kasbawa, Dehiwala, Borlasgamuwa, Maharagama, Kottawa, Homagama and Moratuwa is disposed at the AdaDerana garbage dump, which is managed by the Waste Management Authority of the Western Province. Accordingly, around 300 metric tons of garbage is dumped daily at a site which already has 500 metric tons of waste. As a result of this heap of garbage, area residents are severely inconvenienced and complain of health and sanitary issues. The locals also claim that authorities have requested them to evacuate from their households as there is a threat of the mound of garbage collapsing. When AdaDerana questioned the director of the Waste Management Authority in the Western Province, Nalin Manaperuma, about these allegations, he said that dumping of waste in the area has been halted owing to the issues faced by its residents. Manaperuma further added that a final decision will be taken to address issues faced by the residents on the 23rd of this month, following talks with relevant authorities. Minister of Labour and Trade Union Relations Ravindra Samaraveera stated that measures will be taken to expedite the implementation of a higher minimum wage for the private sector. The minister stated that the final decision on the matter was taken during a discussion with Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. Minister Ravindra Samaraveera also said that relevant legal measures will be taken to implement the minimum wage for private sector employees in the coming week. The minister further said that the minimum wage will be applicable to plantation sector workers as well. A 17-member delegation from the National Defence University of Pakistan is in Sri Lanka and is set to meet with a number of prominent officials from the Sri Lanka Armed Forces and civil institutions, including Secretary Defence, Chief of Defence Staff, commanders of Sri Lankan Army, Air Force and Navy. The delegation, led by Air Commodore Mustafa Anwar of Pakistan today, called on the High Commissioner resident in Sri Lanka, Major General Dr. Shahid Ahmad Hashmat, who elaborated on Pakistan-Sri Lanka relations during the discussion. The Pakistani High Commissioner in Sri Lanka had underscored that relations between Sri Lanka and Pakistan have been based on mutual trust and commonality of interest in maintaining peace, security and stability in the South Asian region. The delegation, comprising senior officers from Pakistan's armed forces and allied officers from Iran, Bangladesh and Nepal, will remain in the island for 5 days. UPFA parliamentarian Bandula Gunawardena claims that there is a clear conflict between Minister Ravi Karunanayake and Sajith Premadasa over the leadership of the United National Party. Gunawardena made the remark after visiting opposition leader Mahinda Rajapaksa at his residence in Tangor today.
මේ වර්ෂයේ ජනතාව පත් වෙලා තියෙන පීඩණයෙන් මුදා ගැනීම සඳහා කුමන වූ ආකාරයක මැතිවරණයක් දිනා ගැනීම තමයි අපේ ප්‍රධාන අරමුණ වෙන්නේ. ජනතාව මේ සියලුම දුක්ඛ දෝමනස්ස වේදනා විඳගෙන ඉන්නේ කුමන වූ මැතිවරණයක් ආපුවාම මේ රජය සුනාමියට අහුවෙච්ච පොල් කොම්බයක් වගේ ගහගෙන යන විදිහේ මැතිවරණ ප්‍රතිඵලයක් තමයි එන්නේ.
මේ දවසේ එක්සත් ජාතික පක්ෂයේ අර්බුදකාරී තත්ත්වයක් ඇති වෙන අගමැති අන්තර පිළිබඳ දැන් රවි කරුණානායක මහත්තයා කියලා තිබ්බා මේකට වැඩිම සුදුස්සා කැමති රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ මහත්තයා කියලා.
මේ දිනවල රවි කරුණානායක මහත්මයාත් සජිත් ප්‍රේමදාස මහත්තයා ද්විඝට්ටනාත්මක වැඩපිළිවෙලක් ඉදිරිපත් කරලා තිබෙනවා. බොහොම පැහැදිලිව මවගේ පියාගේ දේශපාලනයේ විකුණලා ඉස්සරහට එන්න බෑ කියලා පැහැදිලිව රවි කරුණානායක කියන්නේ සජිත් ප්‍රේමදාස මහත්තයා. ඉතින් සජිත් ප්‍රේමදාස මහත්තයා, රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ මහත්තයා, කරු ජයසූරිය මහත්තයා, නවීන් දිසානායක මහත්තයා මේ ඔක්කොම පොරේක තමයි ඉන්නේ නායකත්වයේ සඳහා.
Well, we have business news on the other side, so make sure you stay tuned for more news.
You are watching Sri Lanka's #1 news channel. This is AdaDerana 24.
The Cabinet recently agreed to transform the Colombo Stock Exchange, now a non-profit organization owned and managed by its members, to a profit-oriented shareholder-owned company. In due course, the demutualized stock exchange itself may be listed and its shares traded on the stock exchange. Accordingly, the Cabinet of Ministers last week approved the proposal presented by the Subject Minister Mangala Samravira to amend the draft bill to change the legal status of the Colombo Stock Exchange. Asian and European stock markets mainly rose today on optimism over trade talks between Beijing and Washington, while Frankfurt won a boost from rising investor confidence. It is reported that equity markets in Europe are higher as the positive move in Asia overnight has rubbed off on European sentiment, and the firmer prosperity prices in China combined with continued optimism surrounding the US-China trade talks drove Chinese stocks higher. Meanwhile, Asian equities rose on the eve of vital Chinese first quarter economic growth data as investors brushed off a weak lead from Wall Street. London's FTSE 100 climbed 0.3%, helped by news that British employment has reached a record high level, shaking off uncertainties surrounding Brexit. New York's Dow index, however, was down by 0.1%. Meanwhile, the all-share price index ended 0.1% firm at 5,591.83 today, although the benchmark stock index fell 0.6% last week, recording its first weekly fall in 3. The index has declined 7.6% so far this year. Turnover came in at 173 million rupees, less than this year's daily average of 605 million rupees. Foreign investors bought a net 31.4 million rupees worth of shares today, but the market has seen a year-to-date net foreign outflow to 6.04 billion rupees worth of equities. We now have Achyutan Srirangan from First Capital Holdings for a report on how the market performed today.
Both bond market and the stock market, most of the market participants remain mostly on the sideline due to the festive season. Amidst overall market witness slow. Bond market, secondary market yield curve shifts slightly upward during the early hours of trading on the back of selling interest witnessed on the mid to long term maturities. In the stock market, Bros ended on the green for a second consecutive day and mainly on the gain made by HNB and Melstar. And nearly 54% of the turnover derived by Dialog. The turnover recorded nearly 3 weeks low, while a net foreign inflow was witnessed amidst high foreign participation.
The Sri Lankan rupee closed slightly weaker today at 174 rupees and 60 to 75 cents against the US dollar, lower than Friday's close of 174 rupees and 45 to 55 cents. Let's now take a look at how the Sri Lankan rupee traded against other currencies during the day. And with that, we cross over to a short commercial break, but make sure stay tuned for more news on the other side.
You are watching Sri Lanka's #1 news channel. This is AdaDerana 24.
Whistleblowers across the European Union have won greater protection under landmark legislation aimed at encouraging reports of wrongdoing. The new law approved by the European Parliament today shields whistleblowers from retaliation. It was approved by 591 votes with 29 votes against and 33 abstentions. It also creates safe channels to allow them to report breaches of EU law. This is the first time whistleblowers have been given protection across the European Union. If no appropriate action is taken or in cases where reporting to the authorities would not work, whistleblowers are permitted to make a public disclosure, including speaking to media. National authorities across the European region are required to train officials on how to deal with whistleblowers under this new legislation. A Moscow court has sentenced a 63-year-old Norwegian Frode Berg to 14 years in a strict regime labor camp for spying on Russian Navy submarines. Berg, arrested in Moscow in 2017, denied the accusation. He formerly worked as a guard on the Norwegian-Russian border. Berg admitted acting as a courier for Norwegian intelligence, but said he had little knowledge of the mission, while a Russian ex-policeman accused of passing him Navy files has also been jailed. Berg's lawyer, Ilya Novikov, said his client would not appeal against the verdict, but would seek a pardon from President Vladimir Putin. Norway, a NATO member, shares an Arctic border with Russia, and for decades their relations were amicable, even during the Cold War. But ties have worsened since 2014, when Russia annexed Ukraine's Crimea Peninsula. British police have arrested 113 people after climate change activists blocked some of London's most famous roads, including Oxford Circus, Marble Arch and Waterloo Bridge, in an attempt to force the government to do more to tackle climate change. The protest, led by British climate group Extinction Rebellion, brought parts of central London to a standstill yesterday, and some stayed overnight for a second day of protest day. Extinction Rebellion, which generated headlines with a semi-nude protest in the House of Commons earlier this month, is demanding the government to declare a climate and ecological emergency and reduce greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2025. Tents littered the roads at Oxford Circus, with some activists huddled beneath a pink boat with the words "Tell the Truth" across its side. One placard read "Rebel for Life." Police said 5 of those arrested had been detained after a Shell building near the River Thames was targeted. Yesterday, 2 protesters scaled up scaffolding writing "Shell Knows" in red paint on the front of the building, while 3 other protesters glued their hands to the revolving doors at the entrance. Bangladesh Cricket Board today announced its 15-man squad for World Cup, scheduled to begin in England on the 30th of May. Fast bowler Mushraf Mortaza will captain the side, while star all-rounder Shakib Al Hasan is announced as his deputy. Bangladesh selectors have also included batsman Mosaddeq Hossain in the 15-man squad, while showing faith in uncapped Abu Jayed and naming him in the squad over injured Taskin Ahmed. Liton Das, who had failed to perform well during New Zealand tour, has also been named in the squad over Imrul Kais. The selectors have not tinkered much with the middle order, as both Saumya Sarkar and Sabir Rahman have been named in the 15-man squad. Mohammad Mithun, Mohammad Saifuddin and Mehdi Hassan are also named in the squad. All these players are going to the World Cup for the first time. The core Bangladesh side, which includes Shakib, Tamim Iqbal, Mushfiqur Rahim and Mushraf Mortaza and Mahmudullah, is included in the 15-man squad. Bangladesh are scheduled to start their World Cup campaign against South Africa on June 2nd at the Oval in London. And with that, we conclude this edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining us and have a pleasant evening.